There are usually two objections that people bring up when you talk about jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, in the context of self-defense. There's always the same two objections. Number one is all this butt scooting and guard pulling and lack of takedowns is useless. You're really going to pull guard in the street? And I agree. You're probably not going to pull guard in the street, although there certainly are circumstances when that would make sense. And the lack of takedowns in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a legitimate issue. And we'll talk about that some other day. I agree that that's an issue. I don't agree that it's the make or break issue, the way some people want it to be, but it's an issue. The second thing that people always bring up, though, is multiple attackers. What if there's more than one guy? What if you're being attacked by two people? What if you're being attacked by three people? And there's a whole bunch of problems with this, not the least of which is, what's your alternative? If your alternative is kickboxing, or Choi Lei Foot Kung Fu, or Wing Chun Kung Fu, the onus is on you to prove that that's a better solution. So let's get into the idea of multiple attackers. First of all, I gotta say, it's always a terrible, terrible idea to try and fight anybody. Because even if you win, you could lose. If you and I are fighting and I knock you out, I win until you fall over, hit your head on the pavement, get permanent brain damage or die, and I end up in prison for 17 years, which has happened many times. This isn't something that's specific to the United States. This has happened in Canada. This has happened in the States. This has happened in New Zealand. This has happened in Australia. This has happened in England. It's always dangerous to fight. So I don't suggest fighting one attacker. But now let's say you're dealing with two. You just got no choice but to fight more than one person. It's a very bad idea, and it's a bad idea for a couple of reasons. It's really technically difficult, but also the way to calculate the IQ of a group is to take the average IQ of the people in that group and divide it by the number of people in that group. So you're fighting three guys, and they're each, one guy's 110 IQ, the other guy's 90, the other guy's 100. The average IQ is 100. You divide that by 3, you're dealing with a group IQ of about 30. Meaning that people do really stupid things when they're in groups. Meaning that if you end up down on the ground and one guy starts shit-kicking you, the other guys could start shit-kicking you too. They might do some really stupid things. So dealing with a group is super dangerous from a technical point of view, but it's also really, really dangerous from just you're dealing with really dumb people making really bad decisions. So where do we get our information from? You know, like, we can have all this theory. We can have theory in the martial arts. I have a theory that Maiden looks at a mirror, Kung Fu technique, is a great defense against a punch. I have a theory that Jichung Choi, the Wing Chun punches from the center line, are a great technique. How do we test these? Because the reality is, most great ideas, most ideas that are super, super sound theoretically, when they get tested against reality, it's like dropping a watermelon on the pavement. Sometimes certain types of watermelons break the pavement, but most of the time the pavement breaks the watermelon. Most of the time, reality breaks theory. All of science is about coming up with a theory and testing it, and most of the time, the theory is wrong. That iterative process of testing things to find out what works and what doesn't is really what allows you to have faith in the result. So where are we getting our information from when we're talking about fighting multiple attackers? So here's where I'm getting some of my information from. I've done training against multiple attackers. Now, this doesn't mean, because I have done some training that looked like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, right? Like, I'm there in the middle of a circle, and one guy attacks me, and I don't know which it's going to be, but as soon as I recognize that he's coming, I do defense number 2. And then the next guy comes in, and they're staggering. The next guy comes in, and I do defense number 3. And the next guy comes in. It's better than nothing, because I'm keeping a 360-degree awareness. But the trouble is, people don't attack like that. They don't attack one at a time. There's a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where he breaks into a factory, and he's there, and there's a whole bunch of people, and they start rushing him, and they go, no, wait. Remember, attack one at a time. And it's a joke, of course, because that's not how people actually, mob attack someone. It's not one at a time. So that's not the kind of training I'm talking about. I'm talking about live sparring. So I have done live kickboxing sparring against more than one person, against 2 people. And you know what? It really sucked. It's absolutely exhausting. If I could just say do kickboxing and you and I could kickbox for 20 minutes and then I get tired, if that's my level of fitness, if I'm going against two of you, I'm going to get exhausted in 30 seconds. It's exponentially more tiring to kickbox more than one person. And three people, forget about it. Unless you're King Kong and you're fighting a bunch of kids, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work, especially once you include the clinching. So I have done kickboxing against multiple people. I've also done jiu-jitsu against multiple people. I've done a fair bit of that. And guess what? It also sucks. Not quite as much as kickboxing against multiple people, but it does suck. And I've gone against really big guys and smaller guys and guys working in tandem and guys getting together and coming up with a plan before they jump you, because they knew that what they were about to do. So I have that experience base. I've done a little bit of full contact stick fighting, Dog Brothers style, against multiple people. That's where you take like the fencing helmet, maybe hockey gloves or maybe lighter gloves, maybe elbow pads, and then a rattan stick, and it really freaking hurts when you get whacked across the arm or whacked across the head because you're going full force. I've done that against multiple people a couple of times, not as much. That's my least amount of experience there, but I have done it. Also, I've probably watched way too many hours of street fight videos and sort of surveillance camera footage of mob attacks than is good for any one human being. So that's also where I'm drawing my information. So I want to be upfront. That's where I'm getting my information from. My point is, anyone who's got an opinion about multiple attackers, who hasn't trained it, who hasn't tested against people who are really attacking, not people who are attacking one at a time, or like Aikido Randori, where there's multiple people coming in one at a time with their overhand chop, and then like going flying, and then I move on to the next side. That doesn't really count. I'm talking about contested pressure testing against multiple people. And it's not fun to do. It's really not fun to do. But unless you've done some of that, I don't think you actually have standing in this argument. Everything that you're talking about is theory. And theory by itself is just that. Theory, until you test it against reality, you don't have a leg to stand on. So, how do you do it? What did I learn from that pressure testing? Well, if you and I are fighting, and I want to beat you consistently, if you and I are fighting, and you're better than I am, and I managed to beat you, it was probably luck. Either it was luck or really good strategy. For me to beat you consistently, I need to have you outgunned in one or more areas. I either need to be a lot bigger and stronger than you, or a lot faster than you, or have amazing strategy, or have really good technique. And that's, of course, the variable that we have the most control over. The times that I've been successful in sparring multiple people on the ground is when my skill level was, say brown belt or purple belt, and they were white belts. That's pretty easy. Even if they're big and strong, if they don't know what they're doing, and you do, then it's an unfair contest. Really, it's pretty easy to get somebody in a quick choke, arm lock, or leg lock, take them out of the match, and then continue. But to beat one person regularly, to beat one person predictably, you really need to be better than them at one or multiple areas. To beat two people, you need to be a whole lot bigger than them. You need to be a whole lot faster than them. You need to be a whole lot tougher than them. Your technique needs to be absolutely at another level. So, right, everything that you have to do to beat one person gets hugely amplified, plus a dose of awareness. How do you get that awareness? By doing that kind of sparring. So, if Stephan wants to beat two Stephans, he's gonna lose. If you're trying to beat two people who are your size, your weight, your strength, and your skill level, you're gonna lose. Statistically, you're gonna lose. Maybe one time in 100, you manage to land a quick punch and knock out the first replica of yourself, and then move on and engage in a reasonably fair battle with the other guy. But most of the time, you're gonna lose. And from having tested this, most of the time when you're doing stand-up, what really gets you is one guy kind of clinches you, rushes you, ties you up, holds you in place, and then the other guy comes and tees off on you. So to say grappling is not the answer is a misnomer, because grappling is going to happen against multiple people, or at least they're instinctively going to try and do it. So you do need to address that. So let's just talk about this whole idea of, yes, if I'm attacked by multiple people, I'm never going to grapple. Well, I see that point. And sure, it would be nice if I'm facing 3 people to knock out the guy on the right with a right cross, knock out the guy on the left with a left hook, and then take on the guy in the middle. That's a great theory. Remember that thing about the watermelon, the theory of watermelon impacting the reality of pavement? That's what's going to happen most of the time. So, if I did have to fight 2 people, sure, that's a great starting point. You know what? I'm going to try and sucker punch this guy as hard as I can and then deal with the other guy who will then be alerted to it being a fight. But long before that comes things like verbal de-escalation, right? Really, 2 against 1, your odds suck. And we haven't even added in weapons. So 2 against 1, even if it's a, quote, fair fight, meaning no weapons, your odds suck. Now we started adding in weapons, your odds suck even worse. So number 1, number 2, number 3 is verbal de-escalation. 4, 5, 6 is running the hell away. Let's say there's just no way you can verbally de-escalate this. Let's say you're old and you're slow and you're broken and these are young guys and you're pretty sure that they can run faster and you're wearing steel-toe boots. You can't outrun these guys. All right, now you got to fight. Your next option is to arm yourself. If you can pick up a stick, if you have a knife, it's always super dangerous to escalate it. But if you know for sure it's going down, arming yourself and using that as threat to drive the other people away, to discourage them, might be contextually the right thing to do. Now you're fighting inside a gym, there's nothing around, there's no way you can talk them out of it, there's no way you can run away, there's no way you can arm yourself. Well, if you can change the odds, if you can change it from 2 to 1 to 1 to 1, great. Maybe a sucker punch can work in your favor. If you go for one of the knockout areas and just put everything you can into it, maybe you'll get lucky. But you have just escalated the conflict. If I'm arguing with 2 of you, and I distract and like, oh, is that a cop over there? And I just hit you as hard as I can in the jaw, and it doesn't work. If that doesn't work, well, now the level of conflict has gone from, a 6 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. You're not only going to want to knock me out, you're going to take revenge afterwards and keep on hitting me and keep on hitting me and keep on hitting me. That's a really dangerous thing. Another option might be, quick arm drag to standing rear naked choke. I've shown that many times in many different YouTube videos. I'll link to it somewhere. It's a totally viable option. I think if you search for the most important move for self-defense on my self-defense tutorials channel, you'll get to an example of an arm drag to a rear naked choke. If I can arm drag, rear naked choke you, use you as a shield between me and the other guy, great. That's not a bad theory. Again, it's a watermelon. Maybe it'll bounce off the pavement. Maybe the pavement will crack. Maybe I'll get lucky. I've got to be really good at something, remember? If you're equally good at defending the arm drag as I am at applying the arm drag, and you're as big as me, and you're as strong as me, and you got another guy, I'm going to lose. So let's just talk about the final thing, which is this idea that you can avoid grappling. So sure, I'm fighting 2 guys. I'm probably not going to scoot in, pull guard, and say, get in my guard, both of you. I'm not going to do that. But grappling's not really a choice. Grappling happens. And I know this from doing kickboxing sparring. If I'm there and I'm using a ton of footwork trying to line up the 2 guys in a row, eventually, and I'm just running circles around them, eventually they're going to get sick and tired of it. And one of them's going to grab me and the other guy is going to start hitting me. That just always happens. Plus, it's also really exhausting to use that level of footwork all the time, moving. Or if you have situational stuff like obstacles, like chairs and tables to be throwing. It's really exhausting. Remember, you need to be better at something than the other guy. So endurance is one of those things that you need to be better at. You don't just need twice the endurance, you need 4 times the endurance of those guys to equalize it, because it's an exponential thing. So, grappling happens, whether it's somebody hanging onto you while the other guy jumps you, or if you just get in a big tumble and fall to the ground, the opponents get a vote too. So, even if your whole strategy is based around getting up from the ground to get back to your feet, to apply your kickboxing, to apply your Muay Thai, to apply your Jichun Choi from Wing Chun or whatever, your eye gouge, throat rip, nose bite from Krav Maga, you have to know how to get up from the ground. And here's the kicker. You can't get good at getting off the ground without grappling. You can't train this in theory and learn technique number 1 and learn technique number 2 and kick somebody off and get back your feet. It's just not going to work. Again, somebody's determined to keep you down. Getting up from the ground is itself a grappling activity. It's itself a grappling skill. Getting up from the ground is a grappling skill, and you only train that by grappling. Let me give you an example. Butterfly guard to X guard to stand-up sweep to ending up kind of an arm-on-shoulder position to going to a smash pass to pass the guard to get to side mount. That's kind of a classic grappling sequence. So I'm not suggesting that you pull butterfly guard. I'm not suggesting that you pull X guard. I'm not suggesting that after you sweep somebody that you start passing their guard in the street. Maybe it's contextually correct. Maybe it's not. I'm not suggesting that you go and stabilize side mount when there's multiple attackers, because you're going to be there stabilizing side mount, and the other guy is going to be punting your head between the goalposts. But that basic skill of the stand-up sweep, of having weight on you, getting up, now instead of doing a takedown to stabilize the position, to pass the guard, and stabilize my friend, no. But that basic motion of getting up to your feet and throwing somebody down, that's implicit within that combination. And that's one way to get back to your feet and have the other guy dumped on the ground. Now, do you pursue the guard pass? Do you kick him in the groin? Do you just run like hell? Do you engage the other guy? I don't know. That's contextual. But the point is that getting up from the ground, even against multiple attackers, is a grappling skill. How do you train that? Through grappling. It's really the only way. So, just to summarize, from having trained against people trying, 2-on-1, I've never gone 3-on-1, but 2-on-1 against, in a kickboxing scenario, is exhausting. It's really difficult. It hurts. It's not fun, but it's possible. 2-on-1 in a grappling situation is really difficult. It's exhausting. If there's no strikes involved, it's not as miserable as kickboxing, but it's still pretty miserable, but it can be done. 2-on-1 in stick fighting, that's really miserable, but it can be done. In all these cases, you need to be better at something or multiple things than your opponent. Number 1 probably is endurance. Like I said, to fight one guy, it's better if I have a little bit more endurance than him, because I can start redlining him before he starts redlining me. But if it's 2 guys, my endurance needs to be 4 times better. My endurance needs to be absolutely top-notch, because not only is it fighting one guy, it's fighting 2 guys, and all that movement trying to stay out of the line of fire. It's ridiculous how quickly you get tired. If you've ever done it, you'll know that you're just exhausted within 30 seconds. So you need to be better at something. Endurance and technique are the 2 obvious starting points, because no matter where you are, you need endurance. But, if you happen to be twice the size of the other guys, great. If you happen to have twice the punching power of the other guys, great. If you're a world-class judoka and you can pick one of those guys up and cut a garuma of them onto the pavement, take them out, great. You have to be better at something than the other guys. The other point is that your opponent gets a vote too. You can have this wonderful strategy. My strategy is to only use right crosses and left hooks and just knock out all 4 guys if I'm fighting 4 guys. That's great. Sadly, your opponent gets a vote too. So all your theory can go out the door pretty quickly. You have to pressure test it. If you don't pressure test what you're doing against people who are trying full force to stop you and do it back to you, you're living in a fantasy world. And it's amazing in this day and age how many people are still living in fantasy worlds. They're doing, I train against multiple attackers, and when you look at it, it's really a choreographed thing. One guy comes in at a time, 2 guys come in at a time, or 3 guys grab you and another guy holds a knife to your throat, and then you do, magic defense technique 1. But if those guys actually were incentivized to hold on to them and let's really stick them with this knife, or practice knife or electro knife, it would go very, very different. And the final point is you've got to be well-rounded. If you're a grappler, you got to know some basic striking. You don't need to be a world-class kickboxer. you do need to know some basic striking, in part so you can use it, and in part so you know what you're dealing with. If you're a really high-level striker, you need to know some grappling, again, so that you can recognize what's happening to you and that you can use it a little bit yourself. If you're an empty hand guy, you train only MMA. Let's say you train MMA and you've got the magic, perfect mix of stand-up and ground. Do you ever go and train basic awareness with a knife? Do you ever wrestle with a knife, a fake knife? Do you ever do any full contact stick fighting? A little bit of that goes a long way. All of a sudden you get a whole new appreciation for range, in the case of stick fighting, and a whole new appreciation for focusing just on the weapon hand, in the case of the knife. And if you are, say you only do weapons, you're either a Filipino martial artist guy or you're a gun freak. The gun freaks are the worst. Dude, I would just shoot him. I would just, take out my, 45 and, double tap. Well, half the time when somebody's telling you that, their weapon's actually out in the car. And if you watch enough video, you see that just having a gun drawn isn't a guarantee it's not going to turn into a wrestling match. There's tons of footage of cops out there getting in wrestling matches, and if they could back off and pull the gun on the guy, they certainly would. What are they doing? They're rolling around on the ground. Maybe they're even afraid to pull the gun out because now the other guy, now it's out of the holster. Now the situation has escalated, and it's much more dangerous. There's a reason that Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL from hell, advocates doing jiu-jitsu. Not obviously only jiu-jitsu. The Navy SEALs aren't going to break into an enemy compound and go for the flying armbar. They're not going to do that. But training against resistance and knowing how to deal with people who are resisting at various levels of resistance, everything from sort of a passive resistance, screw you, you're not going to move me out of here, to going full on and fighting to get your weapon. Jiu-jitsu teaches you all of that. So, can you grapple against multiple opponents? Yes. It sucks. Is it your best strategy always? No, but you need to know how to do it. And you just got to train it. And I'll leave you with that awesome quote. I don't know where it comes from. That if you just stay, that there is no comfort in the growth zone. There is no growth in the comfort zone. If you just stay with what you're comfortable at, then you're never going to get any better.